people from all around the world. Just help you bless this time to us now as we think about ways that we can improve in our work and think about the lives of children we're working for and think about how we can be as best we can for those children. Just pray your best this time to us now. In your heavenly name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Alex, and welcome everyone. I'm here in California, and I know there's people in different parts of the world, and I'm thankful of the fact that you guys were able to join. Can you see my screen? Just want to make sure that you're seeing my screen. Okay, yep. Great. So today is our first webinar or learning session in regards to our Greenbelt certification process. And I am really excited, to be frank, about this time that we're going to be spending together. And I hope this is going to be a productive time and that you're going to learn. And more important, that we are going to also come together as a community. So please, this should feel more like a family gathering than a kind of like a very formal session. So my prayer and my hope is that you guys will be able to interact with each other. Don't be surprised if I call your name. Most of you know me, and you know that I do it because I want to hear what you think, and I'm interested on hearing your thoughts. And I know that this is a very smart, talented group. I'm really honored to facilitate this session, knowing that the benefit is going to be on the comments and on the things that you guys are going to share more than anything that I could share with you guys. So without further explanation, let's get started. So, you know, a lot of people think about what we're doing, and you know, they may say, you know what, Carlos, that sounds great, but that is something that comes, you know, maybe from the for-profit world, not so much applies for World Vision. But as we keep learning, let's keep this as a reminder that why we're doing what we're doing is part of our Promise 2030. And it says stewardship that results in a bias for action, a focus on impact, continuous improvement and innovations toward future challenges, clear value for money, and ever higher standards of efficiency. It continues to say we continually ask ourselves how we could make each task simpler, faster, better, and cheaper. So to me, this is an encouragement for us to do what you guys are trying to do with this certification process and do it in a way that feels like you are fulfilling this promise, not in a way that you are investing time on things that don't matter. So I just wanted to start with that. And again, because we have this brilliant group of talented people, and you know, we have people who even help to craft and help to put these ideas together as part of our promise. I wanted to ask Sue, because I think, Sue, you were in those groups that helped to put together this part of this idea. So I wonder if you have any insight into, you know, what happened when this was put together as part of our strategy.
Well, thank you, Carlos. The mindsets and behaviors were quite a late element in the strategy. The strategic imperatives came first. And so it all came about through a very broad participative process. Lots of people from senior leadership downwards got involved. And we came up with these strategic imperatives like deepening our commitment to the most vulnerable children. And then in the final stages of turning it into an actual strategy, somebody, I can't remember who, said, but none of this is going to happen unless we change our behaviours. We are going to have to actually think differently and behave differently. And one of the mindsets and behaviours that was highlighted was we've got to become better stewards. We've got to be more agile, more active. So that's where we get this stewardship that results in a bias for action. And since I was actually doing the drafting, I put into there continuous improvement and continually asking ourselves, how could we make each task simpler, faster, better and cheaper? Because it seemed to me that you're not going to get better stewardship and you're not going to get agility and ever improving processes unless you adopt continuous improvement and it becomes part of our organizational way of doing things.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sue, for that insight. And I hope every time you tell that story, I get really excited because I can see how in that moment, this became one of the important elements of why we're doing what we're doing. And again, you should feel really encouraged and excited about participating in this type of programs like the Greenbelt, because this is exactly what we're trying to do with your certification. Also, just to mention that we are also having in this call few people who already are green belts, and some of them are black belts already, and they are joining also to contribute and to be part of your journey. So we have Alex Whitney, who is in Ethiopia. He's one of the Kaizen gurus of this organization. We also have Mario. Mario is a black belt, and he's leading the whole continuous improvement effort of the shared services. So he's also joining us today. We have Molly, who is also a black belt, leading the Global Procurement Office in Monrovia. And I think I saw also Sana. Sana, she's also a black belt, who is leading a lot of the effort in the auditing group. So they're also here as part of this journey, and they want to also contribute. And guys, anytime you want to share something, please feel free to share. Later on the other sessions, they're also going to be sharing and participating actively. So let's continue. And just to clarify also, I wanted to provide some key definitions that perhaps are going to help us better understand who we are and what we're trying to become. And, this definition, I took it from the standard process of certification. It says, the certified Lean Six Sigma Green Belt is a professional who is well-versed in the Lean Six Sigma methodology, who is capable of both leading and supporting improvement projects. A Lean Six Sigma Green Belt possesses a thorough understanding of all aspects within the phases of the DMAIC methodology, and they understand how to apply and interpret the Lean Six Sigma principles and tools. This idea started a long time ago, actually, with Andrew Paris in East Africa. He was a master black belt who spent a lot of time developing a lot of the foundation of what we're using right now. And he actually put together this idea of certification. Now we have taken it and make it global. But the idea behind this certification is for you guys to learn and learn meaning theory, but very important practice. So the theory is information, data that we are gathering, but then you're going to put that information, those learning into practice. Then we're going to learn how to see things differently. Hopefully, you are already starting to see things differently. We are learning how to see inefficiencies and waste and problems, and we're going to start seeing those as treasures, things that we want to uncover in the organization because we want to do something about it. And then we want to apply. We want to make sure you guys are making changes to those situations or processes so that we can become better. And then, very important, we want you guys to share with others. You, with God's help, you're going to be the mentors of the next generation of people who are going to be joining us in this journey and this quest for improvement. And so the more you share, the better. And please don't wait until you feel that you are an expert, because that moment is probably never going to happen, because we're always going to be learning and we're always going to feel that we need to learn more. But it's important for you guys to, the moment you acquire new knowledge, go ahead and feel free to share with others. So I'm going to pause here and let you guys to share any thoughts, any questions that you have so far. Also, the black belts, if there's any lesson that you want to share with the team about your role and what you experienced, please feel free to do that. So over to you guys. Bahak, any thoughts?
Carlos, this is Brian here. I'm just curious, this process or this training has been available for what, just over a year now? 2 years?
As the way we are doing it now, probably this is going to be the first time we're doing it in this format.
Okay.
There's been other ways in which we are doing it, which is more through Kaizen events and things of that nature. But this is the first time that we are putting a group and doing it over webinars and Skype calls and through the team sites.
Do you have any idea about how many green or black belts who have either through the previous process or their own or what have you, we would have in World Vision? Do you have a sense of
I
how
think
widely spread that is?
That's a great question. I think that because we are doing now, at the same time we're doing this, we're running a black belt cohort. I can tell you that there's probably around 50 people who have completed their green belt certification, and some of them are on their way to becoming black belts.
Okay, and what's the distribution of those people in terms of either their like NO, SO, RO, GC, or within functions? Do you have a sense of what that breakdown looks like?
I don't know exactly what the breakdown is, but I would say probably is split equally between national offices, like you say, internal group, but not many on the support office side. So I think that's an area that we still need a lot of opportunity, although the UK office are very serious and committed on developing their green belts.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
No problem. Great question. All right, so let's move on.
Hey, Brian. I'm sorry, I'm
Go ahead.
Carlos, just following on Brian's comments just real quickly. Is there a particular push from senior leadership somewhere in WVI for the whole black and green belt training that we can reference with our superiors? Because I'm not sure how engaged knowledgeable our superiors might be.
Well, that's another good point. And part of the effort that we are doing here is not only for you guys to go through this process, but to get also some of those leaders in the organization to engage in this process. I think the educational piece of continuous improvement still needs to happen at higher levels in the organization. Just to let you know that at least with my leaders, who is Jim Borsam and Granville, they are very supportive of what you guys are doing. And as a matter of fact, shortly I'm going to share with you this idea in which I'm planning to have some of those key leaders listening to some of the projects and some of the things that you're doing to help promote this idea further in the organization. But to me, that is also part of our responsibility to share not only with the people, with our peers, but also to share some of these ideas with the upper management.
Yeah, just one more comment in relation to that. Yeah. It would be great, sorry, if you could share with us, with the group, or in general, which are like the best practices that have happened, especially with the black belts or anybody, or how, if you have like one of the best cases where this Kaizen has been used, so that we can also take that into account, or maybe as a business case that we can also share with our teams, or saying that after that applying this Kaizen methodology, this improvement has been completed or something. I know that we're using that within the SRO, but it'd be great if we could also know which are other areas that within World Vision that is being used, and there are successful examples of that. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to create within our team site a folder with some of those cases, so you guys can access them and use them as you need it. Okay. So we have a lot of cases and stories, so I can create easily a folder where you guys can have access. Is that okay, David?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Hi, Carlos, could I make a comment before we move on?
Of course.
So this is Molly in the GPO, and kind of related to the discussion that's been going on so far, I would say, as we're about to go through define and measure and review that, there are two very important phases that sometimes maybe we don't spend enough time in, but we should spend more time in them. And one reason I say that is because documentation, I feel, is very important for these projects when it comes to sharing this with superiors, whether it's your manager or your manager's manager. So they may not want to have to read through every document that you've created and go through an entire PowerPoint of every step that you took to complete a project. But if you can provide them with a clear dashboard or executive summary at the end of it and show precisely that you went from maybe this percentage of late payments to this percentage of late payments, or you saved this amount of time for this worker per month because this process was eliminated or because you took out steps of the process, then that helps prove to upper management and for them to prove to their leaders why it's important that we do these projects. I know that's what I encourage my team to do, because it shows them, it's like, look, we saved almost 40 hours of a person's work per month because we changed this step in a process. And it was a pretty minor step to change, but it had a great impact. But if you can't really show that quantitatively and you just say, oh, we changed it and it made it better, sometimes that's not enough in terms of continuing to get that support from your superiors. But if you can show them that you're saving resources by saving someone's time or by reducing lead times, and these are things that they can more quickly understand and more quickly, I think, get behind. So don't neglect documentation as you go through this, and definitely don't neglect your measure phase, because it's where you're going to get your baseline. And even if you make the improvements, if you don't know where you came from or can't really show quantitatively, then it's difficult to really show everyone how much improvement you achieve through your project.
Thanks, Molly. And when I create that folder for the black belts, feel free to also add some of your examples, which I know you have plenty, so that we share with this group, and they can use them to learn more or to share with others, okay? So the purpose of us today is to bring the team together to provide additional support to help you achieve your goals, in this case, the certification, to provide an overview of the most relevant information that has happened over the last few months in regards to the Greenbelt program, and to answer any questions that you guys may have. I also want to provide an overview of the DMAIC methodology so that you can better understand the direction that you need to go so that you can move in that direction. I also would like to provide some tips and lessons learned in regards to the defined phase of a project, and to be able to answer some of the questions or to have some dialogue about that. And also I want to touch on, in the same way, on the measurement phase. So as you see, it's going to be exciting. I think we're going to spend quality time. And so please don't multitask, because I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. So concentrate on this hour and a half, and I think we're going to learn a lot. All right, so let's get moving. So first, I just want to go, again, we have different levels of knowledge at this point in regards to what has happened with this program. But one of the things I want to mention, as I presented to you with that initial email, is this is going to be a lot of self-guided effort. So meaning you're going to have to spend a lot of time developing and learning and applying the tools and the methodology. So that's why we created this Greenbelt team site that you all have access. So just giving you a quick overview, you'll see here we have in the file section some folders that I'm going to try to keep very clean and organized, of course, to the best of my ability, guys. But, you know, I'm going to have real examples of tools and applications. I'm going to have high-value content, which is going to be really good articles that I have acquired through the years. These are going to be important tools and project templates. This is where you guys are going to document your journey. So you should have a folder with your name, and the idea will be for you guys to use that to document your information. So that way, at the end of this process, when I come and look at what you've done, we should be able to quickly see your documents and see the work that you're doing with your project, which goes back to some of the ideas that Molly was sharing. This is the study material. So these are materials that you're going to be using to get ready for the certification test, which is going to be on April 1st. And so you should be able to find most of that information in that study material. Now, I want to briefly touch on the Greenbelt self-tracker, because this is a tool that is going to help you to track how much progress you're making in regards to your project. So let me close this. So here you're going to see your name, and then please make sure this information is right when you come in and use this. And then you see here you have the DMAIC methodology, right? So when you complete the definition phase of your project, feel free to come here and highlight this with green, which means that you already completed this section. This over here is, for example, right now that you guys are participating on this first WebEx, make sure you highlight this in green. And this homework is, for example, I'm posting questions that I'm expecting you guys to participate and answer. So when you are participating on those questions, also highlight this with green. This is a great tool, not only for you, but also for me, because this is where I'm going to see how much progress, with the purpose of understanding when you need help or when you're stuck. So this is a very important piece that I will encourage you guys to use. And on the accountability partner section, as you know, what I did is I created some accountability partners. I don't know why it's not showing, but I think I also have it on the wiki section. Yeah, over here. So these are accountability partners. So the idea is that when you see that, for example, Sandra and Kirsten are accountability partners, the idea is that, Kirsten, you should be helping Sandra to make progress with her project and participating. And if there's going to be questions published, maybe you say, hey, Sandra, you should participate on the questions and you should provide some answers. Or, hey, there's going to be a webinar. Make sure you have it on your calendar. So try to help each other to achieve the goals that we have to complete the certification. So that's the idea of the accountability partners. So I just want to touch briefly on that. And then on the wiki section, this is where I am organizing most of the information. So I have a video library here that you can come and use. I'm going to be issuing some videos that me or the Black Belts are going to be creating. There's also developing your continuous improvement project. Here's where you're going to see the latest in terms of things that you should be doing to make progress with your project. Here are the questions that I was telling you about, where I'm going to be publishing the questions so that you can participate. And just keep in mind that the more you engage with the questions, the better you're going to be preparing for the test, because I am very intentional about the questions that I'm publishing. So if you're engaging constantly answering questions, I think you're going to be, without noticing, you're going to be helping yourself to prepare for the test. And then here are Black Belt tips. So here's where I encourage Alex and Sana, Molly, Mario to publish any lessons learned and tips for them, so that they can also learn from you guys. So that's kind of like a quick overview of the team site. And I'm going to pause here and see if there's any comments, questions, suggestions. Feel free to share. Over to you guys.
Hi, Carlos. It's Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
Hi. Hi. I apologize. I'm kind of jumping into the whole process a little bit later. So I've been going through the team site, and it's been very, very helpful. I think it's set up in a way that seems quite intuitive to use, so thank you for that. I wonder if you might be able to just go over some of the deadlines for us around the project and the exam, or kind of just give an overview of general timelines if you can't be specific, based on the fact that some of our projects will likely take a little bit longer than others, but any guidelines you could provide would be really helpful. I'm sure it's in the materials provided, but I'd appreciate just a quick overview.
Yeah, no problem. I think I'm going to be touching on that next. So give me 1 minute, and then I'll be talking a little bit more about timelines, okay?
Yep, sounds great. Thank you.
No problem. Any other comments, guys? I saw Luis Mora is in the call, huh? Luisito, are you in the call?
Hi, Carlos. Yes, I am.
How are you doing, my brother?
I am good. I am good. Thank you for asking. We are facing a little bit of internet issues in the office, so I'm using my phone in case
Okay.
you heard some blur like this.
No problem. So everything okay so far?
Well, yes, yes.
Okay.
We're facing a lot of work as usually here in Haiti, and also we're getting ready to go to the annual forum for finance and supply chain in Chile this coming March. So I'm gonna be very, very busy.
Okay. All right, Luis. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
All right. So let's move on. So let's talk a little bit about program overview, tips, and lessons learned. Um, so most important aspect of this learning process is the development and the completion of your project. So don't get stuck. Keep moving. And this is where I'm going to be touching a little bit on the timeline, Brianna, because if we say that the test is going to be in April, and I think it should say April 1st. That's when the test is going to be. So that means that by April 1st, you should have a lot of progress on your project already, which means if you think about the DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, you should move fairly quickly over those three phases, okay? And then the improvement phase, which is going to involve some action planning and it's going to be the execution of your action plan, that may take longer, right? So, for example, you may say, you know what, one of the solutions of my project is that I need to train people. So that's going to take me a couple months to do that. That's okay because it's part of the action plan that you're going to be doing. But as far as coming up with the action plan, so meaning navigating through define, measure, and analyze, you should be able to do that by April. So I think that if you dedicate some time, from now till April to make progress on those phases, I think you're going to be good to do the test in April 1st. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, Carlos. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this one? Sana, anything you want to add to timelines?
Hi, not specifically to this case, but I just want to say that, thinking ahead always helps. It has helped me to, plan my steps. So, that's something that I would just encourage. Because I think sometimes the steps may take longer than you had anticipated. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Carlos, can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I would say just one bit of advice from me would be, if this is the first time you're using this, then maybe not to pick a process or an area that's too large for this project. I think I remember that's what I did, picked like an annual planning process you do once a year. It takes many months, the entire process, and so then kind of going through the steps was a little bit difficult and took a long time to do. So, it's good to focus on those big things, but I think for the purpose of this exercise, it's good to try and pick a smaller one where you can go through the steps and take some learnings from it and then apply that for a later one.
Yeah, I think, Alex, you're touching on a very important point, which is the scope of the project, right? So try to pick a project in which the scope is such that you know that you should be able to see improvement within, let's say, 6 to 8 months. Even if sometimes you need to like cut your project in different stages, I think it's always better to say, okay, I'm going to do this phase of this project and I'm going to finish in the next 6 to 8 months than to have a very ambitious project, as Alex is saying, that is going to be done in, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. So that's a great lesson learned. Thanks, Alex. Any other comments on this? And then also the other thing that is going to help you keep the rhythm of your project are these sessions. Because remember, we're going to go through these sessions and we're going to be covering, like in this case, define and measure. Then the next session, we're going to go and do analyze and improve. And then we're going to be doing control. So if you keep participating on these sessions, I think you're also going to be helping, because I'm going to be sharing some of the homework with you. And I think that's a good way to keep up the pace of your project. So the next item is about the idea that I mentioned of just stay tuned, because I think I'm going to be scheduling few champion reviews with some of the leaders of the organization. I still need to finalize the dates, but I'm going to be asking some of you to present your projects. And so there's going to be a time where perhaps you're going to be presenting your project. So make sure that you keep making progress. And I'll let you know more about the dates once I finalize those dates with some of the leaders. In preparation for the test, don't wait until the last minute. Connect the DMAIC concepts with your project. Make sure you include lessons learned and Q&A sessions with your accountability partner based on the DMAIC. So if you're meeting with your accountability partner on, let's say, on a monthly basis or every other week, make sure you spend some time talking about lessons learned and sharing some of the questions that you may have about the methodology, so that you keep preparing for the test as you meet with your accountability partner. And then engage with questions posted, which is what I just shared. Make comments and ask others. So I've seen a very low level of engagement on the question. So I will encourage you to keep engaging, because you're going to help yourself by answering those questions. And then remember, April 1st is going to be certification test. So I'm going to be sending and blocking the time. I think it's a 5-hour test. So I'm going to be blocking that chunk of time on your calendar so that you don't have anything planned for that date. And so just to let you know. So any thoughts on that? I see there were some questions on the chat box, so let me go and check. Thanks for that tip. Trying to answer one of the questions really makes you think about, yeah, Sue is being very active on the question section, so great, Sue, for the comment. And then David, is the test personal or with, nice try, David, nice try. David is saying, is the test personal or with our accountability partner? And so it's the personal test, David, but good try. Okay, so let's move on. So speaking about that, I try. Okay, speaking about that, I just want to also use this time to recognize people. So this is the Kaizen Star Gallery, if you will. And so let me say, so this, and remember, all I can do is to base this on the information I see on the self-tracker. So, meaning this group of individuals, so Sue, Chris, Brian, Amy, and Sandra, they are the Kaizen stars of this first leg, because they, as I see the self-tracker, I see they completed their project charter, they completed the DMAIC forward thinking template. So they are doing a great job on trying to keep the pace of the project. At least they are reporting that. The rest, maybe they have done it, but it's not reported on the self-tracker. So please make sure that you report that so we can know that you're moving in the right direction. And then also I want to recognize the team effort, because I see that the accountability partners are meeting based on the tracker of the second tab of the self-tracker, where I see that you guys are meeting on a regular basis to help each other. So I just wanted to share that you guys are the Kaizen stars of this first leg. So any thoughts? Anything you want to share with the team? Any lessons you've learned that perhaps you can share with the rest of the group?
Hi,
Go ahead.
Carlos, Brian here again. One thing, I think it was Alex who was talking about the scope of the project.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that we found, and I think in conversation with you before Christmas, by we, I'm talking Amy, Davey, and I as being on the same team and having somewhat related projects, that looking at projects that were deeply part of work we were going kind of going to do anyways, was helpful, because I think many of us would reflect on the fact that we're pretty busy, and adding another project that is not something we had any intention of doing except for the Greenbelt program makes it a lot tougher. But if you can kind of bend or reimagine something you were going to do from kind of a continuous improvement lens, then you kind of get a twofer, because you can do the project, you can do it for your Greenbelt, and it's something you sort of had to do anyways.
Wow, that is very powerful. Actually, if you all can help me with that, that will be fantastic. Because one of the pushbacks that I get frequently is the idea that, we cannot do continuous improvement because we are too busy. That should never be a good excuse for us, because as Brian is saying, if you are able to connect your project with something that you have to deliver, meaning an objective of your regular job, then you make continuous improvement part of your job, right? And so I think that I will encourage you guys to make sure that when you identify your project, it's something that is of high priority for you anyways, so that you have no excuse to make progress on that project. And as Brian is saying, all you're doing is seeing it with a different lens. So I think that's a really important comment. Thank you for sharing that, Brian. Amy, I know you always have very insightful thoughts and comments. So anything you want to share with the group?
Are you asking for Amy Davey?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she's actually on leave, so she'll be listening to the recording of this. But you're absolutely right. She always does.
Great. Okay, so any other thoughts from you guys?
Perhaps I can just reinforce the thought about choose something that you need to get done anyway. This goes back before this Kaizen training was initiated, but many of you, I think, will be aware of the most vulnerable children MVC mapping, and the guidance that we've developed, which will be launched officially tomorrow with a couple of WebExes. That was something that was very much on our work plan, and specifically mine. And this was one of those where I looked at it and thought, I have no idea how to tackle this. Absolutely none. And so this was where Kaizen not only didn't add to my workload, it actually solved a problem, because it gave us a framework and, of course, an excellent facilitator, Carlos, to draw together the learnings so far from field officers who jumped in and had a go at it, and it helped us put together all our best thinking and develop a process which now should be continuously improved. And there are one or two in this call, Bagazilla for a start, who were part of that process. So yeah, really look for something where Kaizen will actually be the solution, not an extra burden.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Sue, for sharing that. I saw a few questions on the chat box. So there's one from Bagasile, my sister. Carlos and Brian, help me understand. How do you plan for continuous improvement on a project you are about to embark on? So if I may, Brian, you feel free to chime in. But Bagasile, I think the best place to start is when you try to complete your project charter. Because when you're trying to complete your project charter, which we're going to be talking in a minute, that would be a great way to confront, a work that you're about to start with some of the elements of the methodology. So if you're about to start a particular challenge or problem, I will encourage you to take the project charter template and start to draft some of the answers, because then you will be taking a step in that direction. So any thoughts from you, Brian, or from the black belts, Molly, Mario, Sana, Alex, that you want to share with Bagasile?
Carlos, on the projects that Amy and I were looking at, they were already set up. Basically, the project was about solving a problem we had with something that was not working. So we hadn't started by thinking about it sort of from a continuous improvement, but sort of by another name, it was already that. So I think any project where the project is to fix something or to accomplish something that hasn't been done before, it isn't too hard to kind of reposition it as an opportunity for improvement. And then I think to Stu's point, actually the project charter and the other, the DMAIC and all of that you're applying to it become part of the solution, because you now have a framework to work through that project instead of just kind of saying, well, here's a problem, who do I need to talk to try and fix it maybe, and being a little bit more random. So that was our kind of approach, was the project is already about solving a problem. How do we give it a bit more structure and focus through the continuous improvement approach?
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. What about you guys? My dear black belts, any thoughts?
Hi, this is Molly.
Go ahead, Molly.
I would just say I agree with what people are saying. If you can find a project that is actually related to the task that you're already performing on a regular basis, then not only will it probably help your workload and help some pain point that you're having, but also it's even easier to get support from your managers to work on that particular project. If you have to do far-reaching and kind of go out to left field to find a project, then you might not be as passionate about it either, and you will probably know less about the subject matter as well. So find something that you also, if it's part of a process that you already touch, you're going to be in the best position to know what ways that you might already see ways that you could potentially improve it. And now you want to do your analysis to make sure you're getting at the root cause, but you kind of just innately kind of know some of the problems because you're the one that deals in this process every day. I think one of our most successful projects that we've had here in the GPO was simply there was a particular function in our e-procurement system where it didn't seem that it was necessary for us to continue doing that anymore because we were mature enough in our process where we didn't need this extra kind of checkpoint to make sure, one last check to make sure the POs were being done correctly before they were sent to the supplier. We just call it it's just buy or hold. And so we were manually issuing all these POs. well, actually, one of our staff members here was manually issuing all the POs, and it was just taking up a lot of time. But actually, the error rate, as we got mature in the process, was so low that it really wasn't worth taking up the hours and hours of the staff person's time to do that action any longer. And so, since it was an action that she did on a regular basis, she could speak very clearly to what the potential, what could go wrong, and how often it might go wrong, and if we took this chance and we changed this process. So I don't know, and I think it's been a relief to her and has allowed her and opened her up to be able to have time to do other projects and to spend more time on other parts of her work. So yeah, I think if it's something that's going to make your life easier in your job, then you're going to be more excited about it, and and it's not going to feel like it's that extra thing, like extra homework that you're doing.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
Yes.
Within the SRO, we detected a problem, and that was the current communications approach. So when what was that? When I began working the first task, that is the defining of the project, it actually just helped me just to put everything in order. It was really good just to see that template and define what's the problem, what is causing the problem, and then what are the next steps, what is actually in scope, what is something that is not in scope. So it's really good, again, like everyone else has mentioned, not necessarily that you need to create a problem, but it's actually something that you're working on. And how, for me, my experience is just to put even my thoughts in order, and then just to follow up a process in how is that you need to solve, what is that you can solve, what is that it's going to take more time or anything, and also who is responsible for that. So it's actually a way just to put everything in order at this stage. So that's great. Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Thank you guys for sharing. That's very valuable. So let's move on. And great questions. Thanks, Bagasilia, for posting those questions on the chat. So I just wanted to give you an overview, right? Because to me, this is the most important lesson that you will learn about continuous improvement. Yes, we can add tools to our toolbox, but unless you clearly understand that the DMAIC is kind of like the main thing that you need to apply to your project or to any challenge that you're facing, then I think you're not going to be effective at using the right tools for the problem that you're trying to tackle. So that's why I always say methodology over tools, meaning it's not, the methodology is way more important than any continuous improvement tool or any system or any software that you may learn. So that's why I'm very repetitive about this, and I'm very intentional with that. And then the next thing is keep it simple. Contrary to what many people will teach you with courses and things like that, I've learned that simplicity is actually good when you're doing a continuous improvement project. So let's go through the different phases and understand exactly what is the purpose of each of those steps. So let's talk about define. The main goal of define is to define the problem or situation or goal that you're trying to accomplish, right? So if you're not clear about what you're trying to accomplish, then it's going to be really hard to get to the destination that you want. So defining the problem, defining the situation or the goal is a very important step in the process. The next step is measure. And measure means understand the current state or the problem of the situation or goal. So meaning you need to understand what is happening right now with that particular problem or situation that you're trying to improve. And with that, it goes the baseline. You need to take a baseline. You need to understand what is your current state. In analysis, you need to identify what is getting in the way to solve that problem or to achieve the goal that you're trying to achieve. So it's really important to analyze what are the root causes that are preventing you from achieving success. Then on the improvement phase, that's when you develop solutions or you identify the improvements that you're going to go and execute. And with that, you need to develop an action plan. It's very important to develop, okay, what are the actions that I'm going to take to fix that problem? And then on the control phase, it's really important to validate the results. So meaning you're going to make sure you compare your baseline, which is, again, the current state, with the results that you're getting. And that's why it's so important on the measurement phase, as Molly was saying, to identify some kind of metric that you're going to use to measure the success of your project. And then on the control phase, the other challenge and something you got to think about is how are you going to make this improvement sustainable? What are some of the actions that you're going to take so that you keep the same level of performance after you implement the solution? So that, in a nutshell, is what you guys are trying to do with your project. Does that make sense? Is there any questions or comment about this particular piece of the learning?
Carlos?
Yes.
A quick question from me. In terms of that measure and then the improve later, I think often it's the quantitative that's quite powerful, right? The reduction in cost, the fewer man hours or whatever, work hours, whatever it is, fewer steps. What guidance do you have around sort of qualitative measures? So there's a change in perception or attitude or reported satisfaction or something like that that's a little bit softer, but is still a legitimate indication that something is better than it was.
Yeah. I think that's a great question, Brian. And don't be deceived by people speaking about time and steps as kind of like the main goal of the methodology, because the main goal is not necessarily that, but is to find a measure that connects with the customer needs. So you are exactly on point when you say, for example, let's talk about your word, which is communication, right? And let's say that the customer, you're measuring customer satisfaction. And that's the metric that you're going to be using to measure the success of your project. That is great, because you're going to be able to demonstrate, right, to say our baseline in terms of customer satisfaction was the customer was at 60% of satisfaction. We did these improvements. Now the customer is at 70%, right? So the whole idea of the metric is not so much about time or cost or any of that, but it's more about what is the CTQ, what is the critical to quality that is linked to the need of the customer. So once you figure that out, or you identify the metric linked to the problem, then you're good to go. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Could I add to that, Carlos?
Yeah, of course.
Specifically with this, there's a project that I'm working on, and one aspect of it is customer satisfaction and the pain points that our customers are expressing to us, because clearly we want to address those, and we don't want the same pain points to be there a year from now. One thing that could be helpful, depending on what project you're working on, is to send out a survey of some sort, especially if it's customer satisfaction, like whatever it is, if it's a rating or if it's a what's your biggest pain point or what do you like most about the whatever it is. But you take that baseline before you actually start making any of your improvements, and then 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever your time frame is, you send out the same survey or something very similar, because then you can hopefully show the difference. This is where the customer rated us before. This is where they rate us now. But especially if you have the same survey or you ask similar questions, you compare 1-to-1, and there should be a change. That's the hope of the whole process. And you can show that. So now you've made something that's a little more qualitative and a feeling that they have, and you've made it a little more quantitative for the purpose of presenting it to outsiders, people who work outside the process. You may or may not find that helpful.
I think they're already finding that idea helpful, Molly. So thank you for sharing. Another example I have about that is Sister Lydia. I think you are in the call, right, Sister? And she called
Yes,
me.
I just managed to join. Thank you.
No problem. But I think you were on time because I'm about to share the conversation you and I had a few days ago where she was thinking about a project, and we talked a little bit about this topic of the measurement phase. And when she explained to me the problem, she mentioned that this group that don't have necessarily business processes documented. And so then the question is, how do we measure that? And one of the ideas I told her is you can start with a baseline of 0, meaning it doesn't exist. And your goal being, well, at the end of this project, we're going to be able to document 10 key business processes. And that's one way to measure the success of this project. So in other words, be creative on this measurement phase about what is that metric or metrics, because it can be more than one, that you're going to use to measure the success of the project. So great questions. So let's move on. How are we doing, guys? Are we doing okay?
Yes, Carlos.
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
What tools are we looking at when we are doing the analyze part of it? Because I can see we are talking about cause, effect, and value analysis. Are there specific tools, or we just use what we know?
Good question, Sister. So when we get to the analyze phase, there are different ways to tackle that depending on your situation. But for example, in the analyze phase, the whole idea is to identify what is getting in the way of achieving your improvement. So if you're dealing with a problem, more likely you need to do root cause analysis. And perhaps you're going to have to use a fishbone diagram, cause and effect diagram. And then maybe you're going to have to use the 5 whys to get deeper into better understand what is the root cause. But let's say that you are using a different, your challenge is different, and let's say that you want to streamline a process, then maybe a value analysis, which is basically, discovering the waste and the improvement opportunities that you have in a process, and removing that waste may be that the approach for the value analysis that you're using. So depending on the situation of your project, I will recommend different set of tools, but that is something that we are going to be learning along the way. But again, the main idea is what is getting in the way, and then once you understand what is getting in the way, let's make sure that your improvement is meant to tackle those blocks, to remove those blocks. Does that make sense, Sister? Okay, good.
Yes, it does. Great, thanks.
No problem. Thank you, Sister. So let's continue. Bahak, are you there? I see Bahak, but he's been very quiet. So
I'm here. I've had some audio issues back and forth, but I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, Bahak, he's always anticipating, so I was... Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go and talk about the define phase. So this is an article, the best article I ever encountered about Lean Six Sigma is this one, and I already put a copy on the folder that is the high value content, and this I took it straight from there, and I will encourage you to read that article. It's fantastic, and in that article it really explains each one of the phases. It says what is the goal, what are some of the deliverables, and what are some of the questions that you need to answer on the defined phase. So here's the question. So read through this, especially on the question section, for a couple minutes, and tell me what is that question that you already answered with your project, or a question that you think that you should be answering in this stage of your project. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and then I'm going to come back and ask you, what is that one question or two questions that you think is very relevant to the problem or the situation or the goal that you're trying to achieve? Okay, we ready? Anybody wants to share? Please feel free.
Hi, this is Juan. How are you?
Juan, my brother, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How's everyone?
Yeah, we are happy
guys,
to see
this
you.
is great. Guys, as I was looking, yeah, I'm a little under the weather, but I'll do my best to, and I have a bit of a delay also. So
yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, but
anyway,
I think we can see what you're saying.
The question that comes to mind within
Juan?
Okay, great. So, what are the key measures for performance indicators, and how are they defined, and what things improve? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I heard you saying, because you're breaking off a little bit, Juan, but I heard you saying that one of the key questions for you is, what are the key measures of performance indicators? How are they defined, and how will you know if things improve? What is the current performance level, correct? Yeah. I was having a hard time.
Hi, Carlos. Can you hear me better?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So yeah, that's the question that pertains to my particular project, or the one that pops out at me, because as you know, within the SRI, we're working on creating innovations or innovative tools and solutions for current needs from different stakeholders. And in particular, my project is about the CSIP, which is the Country Strategy Implementation Plan. Unfortunately, we really don't have a baseline to work from so that we can measure and say, okay, well, this is how it was done before, and these are the improvements that we are going to be implementing so that we can measure any type of actual real success. I think conceptually we could define and say, we believe that these would be the improvements, but it would be quite a task to first of all know if they have improved, because this would all be a matter of perception, right, about those who are using the tools, and so just to give me an idea of how do you apply this question to a new product or an innovation that you really don't have a baseline to work from. Thanks, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think, and of course I'll open it for others to comment on this, but sometimes, my brother, that's precisely what the goal of the project should be. Sometimes when we don't have measures, sometimes, especially when you're talking about difficult issues or complicated ways to measure something, maybe the challenge is to precisely define a measure or define a set of indicators that are gonna help us to better understand a particular situation or phenomenon. A good example would be like the percentage of most vulnerable children, which is something that it doesn't necessarily exist before. So therefore, the baseline is probably going to be maybe 0, it doesn't exist, to the point where you implement something. Now you can measure, now you can take a baseline and you can start that journey of improvement from there. So sometimes, part of the project is about developing those metrics. So any thoughts on that? Sue, anything you want to add? Or Chris, perhaps you have any comments?
Yeah, I put in the chat that this is perhaps another of those where the baseline is we don't have anything, or at least we don't have anything common to all the partnership so that we're all doing it the same way and we can aggregate. And we don't have estimates for the cost of impact. So those are a couple of the things that we're trying to solve with this. And so the measures, I suppose, are to what extent we have something that everybody can use. And the talk earlier about user satisfaction, I wonder whether we ought to actually build in something. We don't have a before because we haven't had a tool before for people to be satisfied or dissatisfied with, but at least we might perhaps somewhere build into the process how much people like the first iteration and then later iterations. Just a thought about that.
Yeah. Chris, Hug, any thought on that? Because I know you have great insight to these type of challenges within your own project.
Yeah, I just posted in the chat. Just I do understand what Juan is raising, and if it's really something that isn't improving on an existing process, if it's something wholly new to the partnership, then I'm sort of wondering if defined success factors that you're working towards would be something you could use in lieu of a baseline or sort of an existing process.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like some of those ideas are helping one to better figure out that piece. I wonder if it would be possible to build a feedback button. Yeah, that's a great idea, Sue. All right. So any other thoughts? I saw, Peter, you made a comment on one of the questions. Could you share with us what is that question that struck you, that you found relevant?
Carlos. Yeah, I picked out that question that I thought was most relevant. Who is your customer? What impact will closing the gap or solving the problem have on your customer? And I just wanted to add to the question or the challenge that Juan raised. Perhaps it's not like an existing business process to improve on, but it's like an existing product or like a outcome or deliverable that can be improved on. And so there may be spaces in the organization, or there are, where there's something that exists, but it's just not working in the most optimal way.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the result of like not a clearly defined business process yet, and that's not clearly documented. And this is where I think I'm viewing this as my project as an opportunity for this Greenbelt project to clearly document it and to establish like a very very defined business process to it. And so for my project, it's e-learning, and there's e-learning content available, but the process isn't clearly defined. So I think it's a good opportunity and example where you can kind of shape and mold it. And the measurables from a quantifiable perspective, I think kind of keep it simple, with regards to like the baselines and what you want to measure with regards to improvements, because ultimately you want to use those things to help promote the areas of improvement, and that's easiest follow when you kind of have like simple numbers or simple targets, and something that's very easy to translate and communicate to like a wider audience.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I found interesting, Peter, that you picked that one, because that's probably the one that it sometimes sounds obvious, but it's not. Because I've learned that whenever I ask teams, who is your customer, they usually spend 30 to 1 hour just trying to clarify that question, which tells me that many times, we think that it's obvious who the customer is, but it's until you really ask that question in light of the products, processes, or services that you are trying to improve that you really are able to clarify and also to better communicate to the rest of the team who they are. And so don't underestimate the power of trying to answer that simple question of who is my customer, because you'll find it very interesting.
Well, Carlos, also this came up in our accountability group, with Sue and Chris, is that in your template example, like who's the customer, who are team members, and, who's a champion and so forth. It's really important to be intentional to clearly identify those things, but then you also provided some good examples that are just very simple, right? At a higher level, like you have donors, beneficiaries, you have like staff, for example, and then, for each of these projects, we can take the staff to a very specific department or organization, but trying to aggregate this back up is like, who does this really benefit? And the simple outputs are, donors and beneficiaries are the ultimate customers.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Thank you, guys. So let's move on. And I just wanted to share a few examples of this idea of the define, right? Because kind of what Bagasile is saying, okay, so how do I approach my problem or my situation? And I told Bagasile, take a shot at completing your project charter. To me, this is the best way to challenge yourself. Now, a lot of people come to me and say, Carlos, I was very frustrated completing this charter. And then I ask why. They say, because I didn't know a lot of the answer, which that in itself is good, right? Because if you're trying to complete your charter and you don't find the answers, that means that there's a gap that you need to fulfill. And so that is a good sign. So don't get frustrated because you don't have the answers to complete this, but instead see it as a way, an opportunity to research and to get deeper into what is going to be needed for this project to be successful? What are the benefits? What are the outputs? So the more you engage in trying to complete this, maybe you're going to have to collaborate with other people in order to complete this. And the other important piece about the charter is that as much as it is a tool to define your project, this becomes a very powerful communication tool to engage people and to help people understand your project. Now, this is an example from Sue. So perhaps, Sue, you can tell us how did you put this together, and what were some of the challenges that you faced as you were completing this? Any thoughts, Sue, on this?
Right, thanks, Carlos. Yeah, this arose out of a task that I was asked to do for Strategic Initiative 4.1, the Revitalize Sponsorship. Jim and Juliana came to me and said, all the support offices have got completely different templates for what they require from field offices at the end of an area program for sending information, photos and so on to the support offices to report to the sponsors. And they said, please, can you design a common template so that there's just one reporting template for ADP completions, which I did. But in the process of that, I realized that each support office also has got a different process. So they will send the template at different times before the closure of the program. Some of them I request multiple photos, some only a few. And so I thought, actually, there's a lot of waste going on here, because from the field point of view, it's much harder work if you're having to do a different process for every support office. So that was where I started from. Let's improve the efficiency of this. And I drafted an initial problem statement and project charter, and got some feedback from key informants, people who really know about things. And one of the most insightful pieces of feedback was from Lucia Boxelar, because of course she is on Evidence of Impact. She's left us now. We miss Lucia. She looked at it and said, actually, you're missing the biggest point. Of course, it's nice to improve efficiency, but what we're really missing is the opportunity to provide the truly inspiring experience for the sponsors at the end of the ADP. By the time the information is filtered through the system, all the juice has been extracted, and we're not actually telling truly inspiring stories as we could. And so, and she helped me to actually go through the evidence and how it could potentially be put together to tell the story of impact in a way that uses the evidence we've got and yet is not technical at all and will inspire sponsors. So that helped me to completely reframe parts of this, particularly the problem statement and the benefits. So now, yes, it will improve efficiency, but the main point of it is that we're really going to use the data we've got to totally wow the sponsors and make them say, this is wonderful, I must sponsor another child. And that will, if we can get that right, that will really improve our sponsor retention when APs close out.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great insight to how you use the charter, but also how the charter was a tool to help you focus on what is most important of the project. So thank you for sharing that. So again, this other example is about the Project Start Agreement template, and just understand this. Sometimes people feel like, oh, you know what? Come on, Carlos, this is bureaucratic and blah blah blah. But keep in mind what the intent of this particular template is. This is your opportunity to use this template to engage some of the other players that you need to have a successful project, right? So don't underestimate the power of this template to send a message to some of the key players and say, this is what I need from you. So the champion, meaning the highest level of leadership within your group or within your organization, he needs to be able to help you remove those major blocks to help you be successful. The sponsor is that probably process owner that also is going to help you remove blocks, but also is going to help you monitor the progress of your project. Then the expectations from you, you're also telling them, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to be following the methodology, documenting the project, and participating in meetings and workshops and team activities. This is what I expect from you, Carlos, to help us facilitate this process. And then the team members, this is what I need. And then these are the expectations of the project. So again, somebody asked me if they needed to like sign physically this template. You don't have to ask for like a physical signature, but if sending it and say, hey guys, do you agree with this? Can you support me on this? I think that should be enough to get started with this template. But don't underestimate the information and the communication piece of this template to help you be successful in your project.
Carlos?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you. I just want to be, can you go back to the slide before?
Yes.
I just want to be very clear on the names. What do you mean by sponsor, champion, team lead, and facilitator? And what would be the role that I should play here? So I just want to be clear on that. If you can explain.
Yeah. So to me, I mean, if you look at books, this champion and sponsor can be almost exchangeable here. Some people say that the sponsor is the highest leader in the organization or in the group that you're in, and others will say the champion. But in this case, just to be consistent, let's talk about your example. To me, the champion will be, for example, John. Who's the national director?
Julie Lee.
Yeah, for example, Julie Lee will be a good champion of your project, as well as I think Leslie, right? He's the ops director. So he will be a good example of a champion. Those two will be people that will help remove your roadblocks. The sponsor will be sometimes your immediate supervisor. Whoever is your leader will be a good example of a sponsor. So are you reporting to Leslie?
No, I'm reporting to Julie Lee, by the way, the national director.
Okay, so then that means that probably the champion and the sponsor will be the same person. So you can have both Julie being the champion and the sponsor of your project. Then you will be the project lead, which you are probably the guy who's going to be executing the changes. The facilitator, you can use Leslie because he's also a certified green belt, and you can use Leslie and myself as your facilitators to help you with the implementation of the methodology. And then the key team members will be the people that you're going to need as part of your project to help you implement those changes. So in your case, that would be a good example of how to use these roles.
Thank you very much.
Now, maybe just to add something, if your project you think is going to involve changes that go beyond the national office, so let's say you're thinking that your project is also going to change some of the global standard processes, maybe it's a good idea to also select a champion that goes beyond the national office. So maybe, I don't know, the regional supply chain leader or the regional finance leader will be a good champion for the project. Again, keep in mind that through this, you're giving them visibility to the project so that from the get-go, from the definition, they should be on board or not with the project that you're trying to achieve.
Okay, let me give you an example. Mine involves the problems we are having with the payment.
Yeah.
And that involves shared service center.
Yeah.
So I already have to start collecting data about the issues and the problems we have. But I would definitely, one of my way of thinking is to start seeing someone in the shared service. Probably will impact other countries, but at least using a pilot to have a person that is addressed. It could be the same person. You don't have to hire another one, but to look like a customer service.
Yeah.
And the reason is why, you know, in Latin America, we are the only country who speaks French and Creole and English and Spanish at the same time. But we still have a gap of communication between them and a lot of issues, different issues that we're finding in the way of the implementation of the system. So I should include, for example, Mario, or I need someone else in the shared service to know about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you will, in your charter, when you define the team members, you should include people from the shared services to participate on that project. Because that way, not only you keep them informed, but also if there's other projects that are going on, similar to what you're trying to do, then this will help to improve the communication among those projects.
Noted.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. Let's keep moving. So the next one is this DMAIC forward thinking template, which really the idea behind this template is to help you think forward, to help you think ahead of your project. One of the biggest challenges that I encounter when we're dealing with continuous improvement projects is that people want to do the improvement and then go back and fit the methodology to that improvement they made, which is okay, but the biggest value is going to be when you're able to define something, and then as you understand the different phases of the methodology, you try to come up with specific actions that you're going to be taking on each of the phases. So that's why, to me, this tool is extremely important, because this tool is going to help you as part of your roadmap. So once you define your project or your problem, you're going to say, okay, what do I need to do in the measurement phase? What do I need to do in the analysis phase? What do I need to do in the improvement phase? What do I need to do in the control phase? And again, this may be changing, or this may be adjusted, but at least this is going to give you a really good understanding on the way forward of your project. So I will really encourage you to complete this particular template as part of the definition of your project. Any thoughts or comments on this one? Okay. So we are, bear with me, 15 more minutes and we close the session, okay? So just bear with me these next 15 minutes. So the next phase that you're going to be challenged with is the measurement phase. So let's do a similar exercise of what we did with the definition. So look at the questions and think about your project, and think about what is that question that is relevant to you right now, that you want to be able to answer or that you have answered. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and then try to identify what is that key question that you find most relevant. Okay, so something important that Sue mentioned is that when she did the forward thinking template, she went back to update some of the elements of the project charter. So keep in mind the charter is likely that you'll have multiple revisions of your charter. So don't be afraid to add changes or modify that. So back to the questions. So what are some of the questions that were more relevant to the type of project that you're trying to complete? Let's see, who's been very quiet? Kirsten, any thoughts from you about the questions? Any questions that was interesting to you? Tell us more. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm thinking.
Okay, no problem.
I think with the measure, the thing that gets me is how do you quantify where you are and how you get to where you want to be. So for me, it's the what data are you collecting, how will you collect it, and how can you ensure that your data collection process is reliable and valid. So with us in real estate, we collect a lot of the property data, and my project is focused on training the offices and collecting the most accurate and reliable data. And so that's kind of an issue that I'm facing right now is how do we do that, and how do I quantify how much of my time and energy and effort is going into it so that we can measure it in the end. And it's something, this is where I am in my project right now, as I'm trying to figure it out, how to do that.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind that when we say that we want to improve a process, right? For each one of us, a process may mean something very different. So based on what you're saying, don't forget that we can identify processes anywhere we are in the organization. So in your case, for example, what is the process that you guys are using to collect the data? So meaning the collection of the data could be a process in itself. And then the accuracy, as you were pointing out, of that data may be one of the improvement opportunities that you have in your project, right? And maybe the project is about how to make your data more accurate and more reliable, which goes to the core of measurement systems. So in other words, the project may be about, okay, how can we make improvements on the measurement systems that we have? And then the other point I want to highlight whenever you're dealing with data and reports is, how are we going to use this report? What is the decisions that are going to be triggered by this report? Because, something I discovered about World Vision is not so much that we don't have data, but sometimes that we're not using the data the way we should. And just some thoughts that I have about, I don't fully understand the project, but maybe those ideas can trigger some um, thoughts from you, okay?
So just to clarify, you're saying that we need to look at how, like the end goal of how we're going to use the data and then work backwards from there?
Yeah, because back to our initial thought of who are our customers, right?
All
We
right.
always need to keep front and center this whole idea of kids and donors and communities as our main customers. To the extent that the organization continues to align their systems, reports, products, services to those key customers, the better and the more value we're going to be providing to them. Which goes to the question you posted, Brian, about the internal customers. But I think it's important to recognize that we always should be questioning, what decisions are going to be triggered from the report that I'm creating, right? Because the more we get into that and the more we challenge that, I believe that the higher the value we're going to be able to provide with those reports.
Great. Thank you, Carlos.
No problem. Okay. Any other thoughts on this section? So maybe this is a question for the black belts. What are some of the main recommendations that you will give to the group as far as how to approach the measurement phase of their projects? I'll be very interested to hear from Alex and Mario, Molly, Sana. What are some of your key recommendations?
Hi, Carlos. This is Sana.
Yes, go ahead, Sana.
So for measurement things, in terms of my experience,
yes.
One tool that kind of helped me to really think through what am I measuring and what does that mean for the customer was the critical to quality table, which was basically a table that lists a customer need and the unit that I'll be measuring it for, and then the definition of what that meant. And how, whether it's being measured right now or if we have a baseline for that or not, and the goal state that I would want to have in terms of that measurement and who's responsible for that measurement. So in my case, I had gone through a couple different examples of a customer need, because for me, our main customer in my department for audit was the audit committee. And then some of the things that they were looking for in terms of our reports, for our quarterly reports, some of them were quality sort of measurement, and then the other ones were quantity. And since it was my first time sort of looking through this project and the Lean Six Sigma, I kind of approached the quantity one first, which was the timeliness of the report. So if I were to look through or kind of give an example, was the timeliness of the report was the need, how soon we distribute the report, and the unit for that was the calendar days since the quarter end, and then the definition was time it takes to distribute the report. And as I was going through the measurement phase, I realized that some of the thoughts that I had in my head, like the bias and what is contributing to that factor, actually turned out wasn't the case. So meaning like originally I thought that the errors were causing us a lot of errors in the gaps in the data was causing us a impact in this timeliness of the report issuance. But in the end, I found that it was actually our review process that was causing some delays or adding to our calendar days. So I had to kind of change what I was measuring in the middle of my project. And I kind of found that to be the case after I did some kind of analysis in terms of how much impact those errors had as a whole compared to the whole. So I think one thing that I could note for the measurement phase is, kind of using the tools that are provided by Carlos in terms of looking at the need versus what could be measured. That's one thing. And the other is that kind of maybe you'll be faced with your own bias, like, okay, this is causing the delay, or this is what's kind of, making this inefficient. But in the end, you may actually come to a conclusion that it's something else that's impacting the process or something like that. So I would really recommend you to think outside of the box and look from different perspective, and maybe engage in, different communication or different conversations with your teammates or colleagues that are involved in the process, so that you can look in the measurement phase in a different perspective. So thank you.
Fantastic. And remember that this on the measurement phase that you should also be looking at your current state process. Something important to highlight is not only the measurement phase requires a baseline, but also to represent the process as it is. Don't try to fix it now. Don't try to represent something it's not. Just make sure you concentrate on trying to represent the current state process as is. Mario, any thoughts from you about this particular section? I know you're very passionate about this one. So any thoughts?
Yeah, I know you would pick me, so thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to say, is something that regularly happen is that you encounter, because we are not used to getting to data, right? And this is because of the methodology. You get to the define and then to the measure, and you get deep into data, right? You will have numbers, you will have a map. But what happens, very often is that you encounter other problems, right? Because you are so into it, and this is also causing other problems. And what you need to detect is that you need go back to the define and see what is your real problem, right? You don't get biased, but what you are seeing. So that you need to make sure you have a backlog of things that you are putting together and putting aside, and you're working on what you really need, right? Also having a good context of where your project is impacting. So the measure phase is helping you on putting that step of the process in context. So that also will help you to identify which stakeholders probably you haven't taken into account in your meetings or any decisions you are making, right? And probably that will be impacting other business units or any departments that you haven't figured out before. So those details probably you need to take care in this project.
Thank you, Mario. Alex, what about you? Any thoughts from your experience?
Hi, Carl. Yeah, I think I agree with what the others have said, but I'll maybe just add, it's going to depend a little bit on the process or the area that you're looking at. For instance, we did one around, I put in the chat around the sponsorship mailing letter process, where you've got thousands of units happening in a short space of time. So it's quite easy to quantify the time it's taking around those. But another one on kind of the grant acquisition process for certain type of projects, where there's only a few and they're very different in time length and things, and those ones are more difficult to quantify. So we use kind of more qualitative aspects around trying to understand the roles of different people involved and how it was working from different perceptions. So I guess it's going to depend a little bit on that side. I think if it is more quantitative, there's lots of stuff in the guidance about measuring that, and that will help a lot as well. But I think don't get too stuck by that if your process is more on the quantitative side, and you need to take more kind of quantitative inputs from people on how it's working rather than being able to measure statistically the current state.
Exactly. Well said. Thank you, guys. Molly, any recommendations for them on how not to get stuck in the measurement phase? What would be one of your key lessons learned?
How not to get stuck?
Yeah, because I'm afraid on this section is where I'm more afraid because people sometimes they get stuck on this measurement piece. So what would be some of your observations or takeaways for them?
So what I'm going to say, I think, relates to some of the other comments that have already been made. But one thing is to, as you and Kirsten were discussing earlier, the working backwards aspect of it, the what do I want to report on in the end? Like what's, when I present a measurement or a change, how am I going to present that? For one project, we were changing suppliers and we basically had this, we were paying for these services that hadn't been audited in a long time. And I was like, okay, but how do you show that us changing suppliers and doing this audit had an impact? And I thought, well, I could do cost savings and cost avoidance. So then I kind of worked backwards and said, if at the end I want to report cost savings and cost avoidance, what do I need to make sure in the measure phase that I'm accounting for? And for me, that would be taking POs and getting that information of what we were already paying and how many units that we had of that particular, we're paying for that service on a monthly basis and how many offices and what offices. So it did kind of help me instead of what is everything that I could possibly measure about this. I was able to kind of narrow that focus a bit to what are the most important things I need to make sure that I'm measuring up front. And then also for me, process mapping is important, but to keep in mind that it doesn't have to be to the lowest level. It can be a high level process map. You could just have 5 main steps, but I think it was Mario that mentioned it to his point, sometimes when you're mapping out your process, it helps you go, oh, well, we know this step happens, but who's responsible for it? Oh, well, if that person's responsible for that step, maybe we should get them in on some calls, or maybe we should ask them about that part of this process that we're trying to redesign and make sure that as a stakeholder in this process, we are not making decisions without getting their input.
Yeah, fantastic. Wow, that's great, guys. Thank you for sharing that. So the last 5 minutes, I want to open up for questions. And just to remind you that the things that you should be working on are these ones, right? So I think from a timeline standpoint, you should be pretty much done with your definition. So now you should be concentrating a lot on the measurement phase, which is, as Sana was saying, define the CTQs. What are the critical 2 qualities that you will use to measure the problem or success? Estimate the baseline. What does your current state look like? Understand the current state and articulate the current state, which goes back to what Molly is saying. Okay, how are you going to articulate what the current situation is? Ideally through a current state map. And as Molly was saying, SciPoc can be a great tool, which is a high-level process map. And then other graphical representations can be useful. And then what are your targets? What is it that you want to achieve in the next 6 to 8 months? So I think this measurement phase is where you should be putting a lot of attention. But yet again, don't get stuck. If you feel you can move forward and start working on the analysis and improvement, feel free to reach out to me or any of the black belts to get help. So back to you guys. What are some of the thoughts, questions, comment in this last 4 minutes? Please feel free to share. Rina, any comments from you? Chris? Jessica? Any thoughts?
Just to say, this makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're all learning DMAIC for the first time here, so I appreciate sort of the what you put up here on the slide in terms of where we should be focused right now, if we haven't already moved down the measurement process.
Okay, no problem, Chris. Any other thoughts?
Hi, Carlos. This is Bakezile. Yeah, I think maybe at some point in time, maybe as you post the other learnings from other countries that have actually done the Kaizen, it will also be interesting for us to basically learn in terms of what type of projects or nature of projects that maybe other teams have actually developed and done, all this entire process, but at the end, maybe they were not implementable, or they were not, or maybe in terms of the customers or the other stakeholders, they didn't receive it so well. So maybe how could we basically avoid that as we continue to work on our project? Thank you.
That's a great point. So kind of like the lessons learned or things that we should avoid, pitfalls of project implementation. That's great. I'm going to actually start writing some of those on the wiki sections, and I'm going to ask the black belts to also chime in and share some of those comments as well. So guys, just to let you know that I'm so excited and I'm so happy that you guys are participating. At the same time, I was talking to one of the leaders of the organization yesterday and telling them how important it is for our organization to invest in you guys, because I truly believe that you are the leaders of the organization. And as much as I hear this buzzword of agility, I believe that there is a large group in this organization that understand how to become more agile. And before we start trying to, hire consultants and buying on this expensive softwares, let's concentrate on helping this organization to change the culture. And I believe that you guys are a really important part of the equation. So to the extent that we begin to continue to develop your projects, but also you guys to help share this knowledge with others and engage with others and help them see the problems and the challenges with the same lens that you're seeing it, I think we're going to be doing a big impact and service, of course, to God first, and then to the kids and the communities that we serve. So just very excited, honored, humble to be able to have this group. And please also extend grace to this process, because we are learning together. And I appreciate that from you guys. So thank you guys for being here, and I'll see you next time, okay? I'll be engaging with you through the team site.
Thank you, Carlos.
No problem.
Thanks,
Bye.
Carlos.
Thank you, Carlos. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Carlos, bye, everyone.
Carlos.
Yes.
Ya. ¿Todavía estás en la línea?
¿Qué pasa, Luisito? Oye, qué bien que participaste, ¿eh? Estoy muy contento.
Mira, me costó un mundo porque se fue el internet en toda la oficina. Y yo dije, en el minuto exacto que decía comience la reunión, ya no podía darle clic para ingresar.